Our session today is using positive words to make a positive difference. Now, when you start talking about positive, I think I heard the ultimate story about the ultimate optimist a little while ago. It seems this lady was in a retirement home, and this gentleman, after she'd been there for a few weeks, came also to the retirement home, and first day at lunch, they were seated across from each other. And all of a sudden, the gentleman became aware of the fact that she was looking at him intently. I mean, she was staring right through him. After a few moments of this, he started to get a little uncomfortable, and finally, he just had to say something. He said, "Ma'am, I don't understand. You seem to be staring at me so intently. Why are you doing it?" And she said, "I just can't believe it." And he said, "Can't believe what?" She said, "I can't believe how much you look like my third husband. I mean, your coloring is identical. Your height is exactly the same. Your personality matches his perfectly. It's absolutely remarkable." And he said, "Your third husband," said, "How many times have you been married?" She said, "Twice." Now, words do make a difference. They express our feelings. They communicate messages, and a lot of people misuse, unfortunately, a lot of the words, and a lot of people misunderstand the approach that we're going to be sharing with you this morning. Several years ago, I flew into the inner city airport in Dallas, Texas, met a client of mine who happened to be headed for the parking lot at the same time, and we were on the tram. We exchanged pleasantries for a moment or two, and there were 12, 15 other people there, and speaking to no one in particular, but everyone in general, my client speaks up and he says, "Zig comes out and regularly motivates my crew. He really gets them all charged up." Then he said, "Of course, I have to come along and tell them how the cow really ate the cabbage." Now, if you don't understand that southern expression, he thinks he is saying he tells them like life really is. So one of the passengers speaks up and he says, "In other words, you are a realist and Ziegler is an optimist." And I said, "My friend, let me tell you something. It is I who really rate as being the realist." And then I said to the group who were there, I said, "Let me ask all of you a question. How many of you have noticed that 90% of the troubles you anticipate never take place?" Well, everybody said, "That's right, that's right." I said, "In other words, only about 10% of the bad things we expect to happen to us really happen to us." Now, what I'm saying is, it is absolutely, utterly unrealistic to be negative. It is absolutely realistic to be positive. That's the message that I am sharing. And the words you use are so enormously important. Many times, regardless of which session I'm in, I use the phrase, "You are what you are and where you are," because of what's gone into your mind. Now, you can change what you are and where you are by changing what goes into your mind. You see, the mind is the gateway to the heart. And when you get involved in life at this level, then, my friends, you are really involved. What difference do words make? We have a 3-day seminar in Dallas. People do come from all over the world. We had a young man there a couple of years ago named Samuel Akwasi Sarpong. Now, he is from the Ashanti tribe in the nation of Ghana. His tribe has the unusual custom, we think it's unusual, of naming their children based on the day of the week on which they're born. Now, this young man was born on Sunday. Akwasi means he's born on Sunday. That name literally in his language means godly, gentle, peace-loving, and kind. This young man just happens to be a minister. Now, the babies who are born on Wednesday are named Kwaku. Now, they have a couple of other names as well. But Kwaku means mean, violent, aggressive, quick-tempered. Interestingly enough, over 50% of all of the crime committed in the nation of Ghana is committed by those who are born on Wednesday. Sociologists say the only explanation they have for it is the fact that an expectancy is set up in the minds of the parents. Can't you just imagine mom and dad talking after they learn they're going to have a baby? And one of them says, well, that's really neat, but boy, I hope that kid doesn't get here on Wednesday. And can't you imagine the first time little Kwaku drops the ball? Can't you just hear old dad saying, well, what do you expect? That kid was born on Wednesday. You see, that expectancy is there, and expectancy does play a major role in our life. Now you might kind of laugh and say, yeah, but Ziegler, that was just in one isolated spot. Absolutely untrue. In his book, People in Quandaries, Wendell Johnson points out that in America, there is not a single full-blooded Indian on a reservation who stutters. Not a one. Now, interestingly enough, there is not a word, nor is there a substitute word in any of the Indian languages and dialects for stutter. Now, if there's not a word for stutter, how are you going to stutter? Interesting question, isn't it? And you might think to yourself, well, now what is old Zig really trying to say to me? What I'm communicating to you is that those words paint pictures, and then the mind goes to work to complete the picture. If I say baby, nobody here thinks B-A-B-Y, but you see a baby. That's the reason I encourage people to avoid filthy language, because words paint pictures. And ultimately, you will not rise above the predominant pictures which are painted in your mind. Right here in our country, Bill Glass, a former professional football player, all-pro as a matter of fact, today does crusades in prisons all over our country. Bill says that over 90% of all of the men and women who are incarcerated in these prisons today were repeatedly told by their parents, one of these days you're going to end up in jail. Long ago, as you know, the all-time bestseller said, as ye sow, so also shall you reap. Then the computer people came along in our day and made it 100% negative. Garbage in, garbage out. But the good news is this. If you put the good stuff in, you'll get the good stuff out. Now stay with me, because this is so important, because words are so important. For example, suppose, now just suppose, when the parents of these children who ended up in jail and prison, suppose the parents had from the beginning in infancy said things like, now let me tell you something, if you keep acting like that, one of these days you'll be the president of your own company. Let me tell you this, you keep studying like that, someday you're going to win a scholarship to the university. Suppose they had said, you keep treating people like that, you'll have more friends than anybody in town. You put the good stuff in, you get the good stuff out. You put the bad, the negative stuff in, and you get the negative stuff out. That's what I'm saying. When our youngest daughter was a child early in school, she was told by an authority that she was a very average student. And to make certain she got the message, they delivered the same thing to us. You've got for yourself a C student. Now, she's pleasant, she's personable, she gets along well with people. Don't worry about it. You've just got a C student. Well, you know, up until then, we thought we had a genius. Now, we did not know some of the things back in those years. That was 27 years ago, 26 years ago. We did not know some of the things then we know today. And guess how our Julie did in school? That's exactly right, an average student. Now, last year, after having been out of school all of those years, last year she went back to school and carried 16 very tough hours, including anatomy and 2 very difficult labs. She came within a whisper of a 4.0, the very top. She's going to be a doctor. You see, what you put in your mind, ladies and gentlemen, makes a difference. Now, what she said to me is something that would gladden any dad's heart. She said, "Dad, I discovered that knowledge surrenders itself to anyone who enthusiastically persists in digging it out." Well, now I'm going to stick my neck out just a little bit with this live audience. And those of you who are viewing this at a later date, I'm going to ask you to answer this question yourself. But among this audience we have right here, how many of you, after you'd been out of school 10 years or more, went back to school? May I see your hands, please? There's several hands, all right? Now, how many of you, when you went back to school, did better, and in most cases, substantially better than you had done before? May I see your hands again? Every one of them. Now, why is that? Well, let me give you some of the reasons. You went back on a plan. You went back prepared. You went back expecting, and you probably went back at your own expense. In other words, you had made a commitment. But the point I'm getting at is what I said earlier, and that is what you put in your mind is so important. Let me encourage you at the same time to remember that if you don't like who you are and where you are, don't sweat it. You're not stuck with who you are. You're not stuck with where you are. You can grow and you can change. The choice is yours. You see, every choice we make in life literally has an end result. So we need to think our choices through. Let me give you a simple little example. One evening, my wife and I were in our favorite ice cream parlor enjoying our ice cream when a young fella and his girlfriend walked in. I assume he was about 25 years old. And as they walked in, I nudged my wife and I said, "Look at there, sweetheart." She said, "I see him." I said, "I wonder what happened to him." She said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, look at him. He's hurt. He's been in some kind of an accident." "Oh, honey," she said, "he's not hurt. He's been to the barber shop or the beauty shop." I said, "You mean that he paid money to look like that?" She said, "Sure, it happens all the time. In my lifetime, I have never seen anybody that mutilated from the ears up." Awesome is the only way I can describe it. Just awesome. It looked like the governor's pardon had gotten to the warden right after he had plugged in the chair. His hair was sticking straight out about 10 inches on all sides. It was green and purple and yellow and orange and lavender, and it came to an abrupt halt. It's kind of a hairdo that if you fell on, you'd be hurt. I mean bad hurt. Now, folks, don't misunderstand. I know. It sounds like I'm being judgmental. It sounds like I'm being critical. I promise you I am not. I'm simply acting as a reporter. Who knows? Maybe that young man's out somewhere making a speech right now saying, "You can't believe a guy I saw in an ice cream parlor one night." Well, you see, all I'm saying is that is the scene that he presented to me. That's the way I saw him. But I do want to make one thing clear. It is his right, absolutely, to look exactly like he does. And I'm here to tell you that I literally would fight for his right to look that way. I would go to war and fight for his right to look that way. You bet I would. But I wouldn't give him a job. Now, what am I saying? I am simply saying that when he chose to look that way, he chose to eliminate 98% of all employment opportunities. Strange as it might sound, when we choose to use the right words, we've chosen to build a career. and happiness and good relationships and everything else. When we choose to use the wrong words, then we have chosen something that will put us lower than we really can be by using the right words. Now, when I talk about positive vocabulary, let me emphasize a point. For years on the platform, I have said to audiences everywhere, you gotta pay the price. Sound like a dying calf in a snowstorm. What a bunch of baloney that is. Let me tell you the day I changed my vocabulary. It was about 9.5 months after I had started my exercise program where I was jogging. And I'm here to tell you that for the first 9.5 months, I hated every day I jogged. I used to get so irritated at joggers who were jumping up and down and saying, man, it makes you feel so good. I was hurting every step I was taking and hating every step I was taking. And for people to say it makes you feel good, I couldn't understand it. But one beautiful spring day in Portland, Oregon, it was high noon. I was jogging on Portland State University campus. And that day as I was running, I suddenly became aware of the fact that the ground was flowing smoothly beneath my feet. I was breathing easily. And it hit me like a ton of bricks. You don't pay the price for good health. You enjoy the benefits of good health. You don't pay the price for success. You pay the price for failure. You enjoy the benefits of success. You don't pay the price for a good marriage. You pay the price for a bad one. You enjoy the benefits of a good one. Now, our sales friends and marketing friends know this. They know that if they were to spend 90% of the time talking about the price and only 10% of the time talking about the benefits, their sales would dramatically drop. What I'm suggesting to you is think in terms of the benefits, not in terms of the price we pay. Now let's explore for a moment what we've learned during these moments we've shared thus far in this session. First thing we've learned is that optimism is absolutely the practical approach to life. The second thing we have learned is that words and names definitely impact our performance. Regardless of what we do in life, those words and names impact performance. That's one of the reasons I'm always dismayed when I hear parents give negative names to their children, nicknames in many cases, because oftentimes the child then is branded with that name. It has a negative impact. The third thing emphasized through this session is the fact that those words do paint the picture. Can't you just imagine when a child is called stupid, what the picture is that is there? For employers to say that their personnel sure are lazy, does that inspire them to work harder? Or does it encourage them to live up to the picture that the boss has of them? The fourth thing that I stress in this session is that every choice has an end result. We need to understand that. When we choose something, we literally are choosing the end result. Now, this final story that I'll be sharing with you demonstrates the power of words. It demonstrates it so beautifully through the power of repetition. You see, repetition is the mother of learning. It is the father of action, and that makes it the architect of accomplishment. A number of years ago, I received a letter from a man named Tom Hartman who had attended a seminar in Oklahoma City, which I had conducted. Since then, Tom and I have become friends, and though I haven't seen him in 3 or 4 years, Tom and I visited a number of times together. We shared telephone conversations and correspondence and all of those things, and he really has a fascinating story. Tom was at the seminar that day because his brother had an extra ticket and it was Tom's day off, and he said, come on, let's go. Well, Tom wasn't overly happy with the first few minutes of the seminar because he thought I was one of these wily, highly motivated, enthusiastic guys that were saying you could just do everything and anything regardless. As a matter of fact, he wanted to leave, but he was stuck right there in the middle of 1,600 other people, so he decided he would just tough it out to the first break. But somewhere along the way, Tom said, you said something that kind of opened my mind. He said, I don't remember exactly what it was. And you know, it is interesting, isn't it? How a message can go around the world, 24,000 miles in a tenth of a second. Then sometimes it takes years for it to go the last 1/10 of an inch. Well, anyhow, Tom said the message broke through. Somebody behind him had said, that's right, or some reinforcement word. He reached over, he got his yellow pad and started taking notes. And he wrote those notes all day long. When it was all over, Tom said that he was so excited. And one of the reasons he was excited was because in the seminar I had said, man was designed for accomplishment. He's engineered for success. He's endowed with the seeds of greatness. And Tom said, you know, when you said that, though I had been disagreeing with everything you said up until then, I looked down and realized that you were headed for the truth. Because he said, I was looking at a 63 1/2 inch waistline, 406 pounds of bulk. He said, I was coming off a devastating divorce. I had a job only because my boss was my friend, not because I was productive. He was the only friend I had. He said, I used to, and in those days you could do this, I would go to the store to buy food on Friday night. I would give them a hot check and then pick it up on Monday morning when I got my pay. He said, I hadn't been in a house of worship in years and years and years. He said, literally, Zig, I was bankrupt in about every area of life. Physically, I was bankrupt. I was bankrupt financially. I was bankrupt from a friendship point of view. I was bankrupt spiritually. And at the end of the day, I started seeing some sense to all of the things you were saying. He said, I looked at the tapes you offered on motivation and self-image, and he said, I wanted them so badly, but I didn't have a dime. And my brother, bless his heart, loaned me the money to get them. Now, Zig, I'd listened to you 7 hours that day. I went home and listened another 7 hours that night. And he said, for the first time in my adult lifetime, hope literally reared its head. I started listening over and over. I've heard your tape on self-image over 500 times. I've heard your tape on the other things over 300 times. He said, you know, Zig, had the police been watching me, I probably would have been arrested. It must have been a comical sight. He said, I'd be riding along and you were talking and I would get involved in the conversation. You would say things like, you were born to win. And I'd say, oh, no, not me. And I would say, you can do it. And then I would respond back to the message on the tape. Oh man, I never have. Yeah, but failure is an event. It's not a person. Give it another shot. And back and forth and back and forth. But you know, something funny happens, Zig. You know, I'd run out of voice, but you know, you never lost a single moment there. You kept saying the same thing over and over and over. Now he said, Zig, I believe anybody would argue with you maybe the first time or the first 10 times, but if they'll just keep listening, eventually they're going to fall victim to the optimistic approach to life. Repetition is the mother of learning. That makes it the father of action, which means it is the architect of success. Tom said he knew he was on his way when he'd been in the program about 6 weeks. He was in a grocery store one Friday evening picking up his food. A little 4-year-old girl was in there with her mother. And in a voice that you could hear for 3 city blocks, the little girl just screamed out loud, Mama, look at that fat man. And Tom said he whirled around to see where he was. Then it dawned on him she was talking about him. Tom said he thought that was the funniest thing he'd ever heard in his life. He said, Zig, I laughed until I literally cried. But then he said, I shed a tear of a different kind. Because he said, I knew I was going to make it. He said, that was reinforced a couple of months later. I'd been to the movie. I was on my way back to the car. I was in no hurry. I had nowhere to go, nothing to do when I got there. He said, I was just ambling along, and I saw a display in one of the stores. He said, I walked up to the display and just started looking. I don't know, he said, whether I was there a minute or 5 minutes, but all of a sudden, Tom said, I became aware of the fact that I was not by myself. Some big dude was looking over my shoulder, and he said, and I whirled around, and there was nobody there. He was looking at his own reflection, which he did not recognize. My friend John Kozak, a brilliant young psychiatrist from Dunedin, Florida, before his tragic death, John said at that moment, Tom Hartman was no longer obese because he no longer saw himself as being obese. All of the positive words had now painted a positive picture. Dr. Kozak said the reason most crash diets do not work is because they take the weight off the body, but they leave it on the mind. And then those people who've suddenly lost all the weight, they lay down and they go to sleep and they dream, but they still dream as an obese person. Dr. Kozak said that at that precise instant that night when Tom Hartman turned around, though he weighed well over 350 pounds still, he was no longer obese because he did not see himself as being obese. What's the end of the story? I don't know. But this I can tell you, in his quest for all of these things, he went back to school. He got his degree in psychology, graduated magna cum laude. He obviously took a great deal of care of his health. And in this process of setting goals, one of the things he did, the week that he got to listening to the program, he went down and bought $700 worth of clothing at a minute deposit on it. He bought size 39 slacks and size 47 jackets. The owner of the store said, Mr. Hartman, who are you buying the clothes for? And Tom said, when he told him who he was buying them for, he said, man, the guy thought I was crazy. But I told him, one day I'll wear these clothes out of here. Where's Tom Hartman today? Well, the last time I saw Tom, he weighed 225 pounds. Now, he's 6 feet 4 inches tall, has a big frame. He was not overweight. He's working on his doctorate in psychology, teaches a Bible class every Sunday morning. Tom Hartman is in business for himself and is doing remarkably well. Now, why do I give so much time and attention to one story? I do that because I don't believe there's a human being alive in this audience. I know there isn't. I don't believe there's a person who will ever view this session with as far to go as Tom Hartman was. Do you realize the man was financially bankrupt? He was physically bankrupt. He was emotionally bankrupt. He was bankrupt in every area of his life. But he started using the positive words, changing his approach to life, changing his attitude, and he got busy. And some amazing things happened. I'm going to close this by simply saying that if you will buy the message, take the thoughts, use the ideas, go forward in your own life, in your own personal, your family, and your business life, then I can close this as I always close by saying, if you'll buy these ideas and do these things, I'll see you. And yes, I really do mean you at the top.